Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the installation of the Overwatch Precision Poly DAT trigger. I know in my previous video where I covered this on my G48, I had stated that I wasn't going to go through the process due to the fact that there was already videos out there that were covering it. I kind of backtrack on that a little bit, and I decided I would go ahead because I think it could be helpful. I know something that put me off from changing out the trigger shoe much earlier was the fact that I know that the roll pin that holds the trigger shoe onto the trigger bar is captured. I didn't know how difficult it was going to be or it was not going to be. When it came to find out with the G48, it was very, very simple. But I just wanted to kind of show that and highlight that in this video to show all of you how easy it is. And then also on a side note, I will go ahead and go through how this trigger shoe has affected my G43. So again, this is not exclusive to the Overwatch Precision trigger. Any trigger out there that is the shoe only, it's the same process. The only thing that might be different is I do know that Overwatch partially installs the roll pin. I talked about that in the last video where that does make it a little bit easier. I can't speak if that is accurate or not for any other trigger shoes out there, but regardless, I'm going to walk through the process of the installation, removal of the OEM trigger shoe, and then installation of the new one. So back to how this may affect my G43. As you see, the gun is empty, no bolts in the chamber. Similar to the previous videos I've done, I took a pencil and I made hash marks where the tip of the trigger shoe sits while the striker is cocked. Again, where it sits once you hit the wall, and then where it sits on over travel once the striker has been fired. So kind of dual benefit here with this video. But let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so any part of doing any type of gunsmithing type work or modification type work is having the tools to do the job. This here is a bench block. This one's made by Real Avid. I believe there's other manufacturers out there that manufacture something that's very similar. This tool here is essential, not just for a handgun owner, but also for a rifle owner. You see it simply is hollowed out on the bottom side, has various size chamfered holes for anything that if you're trying to drive pins out, along with a channel into center. So very inexpensive tool. I want to say, if I remember correctly, it cost around 20 bucks, but this thing is really invaluable. It does have magnetic surfaces on the inside, so as you knock out pins or whatever it may be, they can get caught onto the magnetic surfaces. They don't always, but as you can see, it's completely enclosed. So if you're working on a flat surface as you're knocking out pins or whatever it may be, they will stay contained within the perimeter of this bench block. So as you see here, I have my frame completely broken down, disconnected from the slide. Well, disconnected from the slide. And for the tools I have for the job outside of the bench block is I have a standard 1/16 punch. And then I have a 1/16 roll pin punch along with a 5/64 and a small hammer. So another tool. I started the video assuming that everybody had one of these. This is a Glock tool, so a Glock armorer's tool. It is simply a punch. I don't know the diameter right off the top of my head, but if you don't have one of these and you just have a punch, that works also. I always drive my pins out from left side to right side. In the Glock 43, you have your trigger pin here, and then you have your trigger housing pin back here. When you are driving out or pushing out the trigger pin, what you typically have to do is it gets captured by the trick to getting your slide release off easily. As you see here, this is the slide release lever itself, and internally it follows this line right here. So what you want to do is you can put light pressure onto the side of your pin, and what you want to do is use your other finger and push down on this bar right here. As you see, if I try to push it out without doing anything, it doesn't want to come out. When it comes to Glocks, you should never have to drive anything out with a hammer. Everything should be pretty much just very loose. So as you see, as you push down on it, it doesn't want to come out. So maybe put light pressure onto the pin itself with your Glock Armorer's tool. Use your thumb to engage that slide release, and the pin just falls right out. So go ahead and put that to the side. We are gonna, next step would be to remove your locking block. I typically just use the armorer's tool, apply some upward pressure, pop it up, get it out of there. Once you have that removed, you can remove your slide release. This one here is a Vickers Tactical, but it is basically the exact same as an OEM with the surface, or with the exception of the gripping surface. So once you get that out, everything here from your trigger shoe, it should be very loose. So the next step would be to drive out this pin here. Again, using the Glock Armorer's tool does not require any type of pressure or anything that you have to preload in order to drive it out. It just pushes right out. And then as you see there, stuck underneath my bench block. So put that to the side. And once you get to this point here, this here is your trigger housing. You can go ahead and pull up on that, and the whole unit comes out as a whole, from trigger housing to trigger bar, and now your trigger shoe. So with the G43, you see here where the crucifix engages the trigger bar, just pop it loose past the connector, pop it out of the groove, just like that. A lot easier design with the newer generation models compared to, say, like the Gen 3s, where you had the spring and you had to rotate the whole thing out. It just pull it at a certain degree, pops out of the groove, there you go. So now, as you see here while I have it out, this here is the Ghost Ink edge connector. It's rated at 3.5 pounds. I have been pretty happy with this connector so far. Haven't had any type of issues with it. But back to the topic of the video, here we have the trigger bar. And as you see, the trigger shoe itself is held on with this pivoting pin right here. You can see the circle. The camera will focus. But on the back side, you don't have anything. So you're going to have to drive this pin out here. All right, so for the next steps, I am going to want to pull out my trusty bench block, and my whole objective here is that I'm going to use a hammer and a punch, and I am going to drive this pin out through the back side of the trigger shoe. So you see it is captured when you drive it out. It should start coming out from the other side. I mean, this is just polymer. I've seen other reviews that say that this may crack, this may split, this may blow out excessively around the diameter of the pin, or it may come out smoothly and clean, almost like a cookie cutter. So it doesn't really matter, because once you get this trigger shoe out of here and you take it out, you are not going to use it again. When you are driving out the pin, you definitely don't want to risk, or be very careful about changing the bend angle on your trigger bar here. So trying out the different holes on this bench block, I find that this here is a great spot for me able to drive the pin out. It lays the trigger shoe flush onto the block with no load being put onto the trigger bar. So when I do start driving that pin out, I don't have to worry about that I change any geometry here or deform this at all. So again, line up that hole. I'll put my punch onto the pin and then just start tapping. All right, so that gave way. And as you see here, the trigger housing did split. When I did the trigger on my G48, I did not have any issues with it splitting at all. It was more of the cookie cutter punch out like I discussed, but not really a big deal because you are not going to use neither the trigger shoe again or the pin that comes with it. Now this one here, as you can see, it is a solid pin. Focus camera. It is a solid pin, but you will not need either one of those. Now I'm going to take my Overwatch Precision Poly DAT trigger shoe only. Let's go ahead and open this up. Very nice of them, give you a couple free stickers. And then here's the shoe. So as I mentioned before, instead of having a solid pin like the OEM, this one here has a roll pin. So now you're going to take the opposite steps as you took as removing it. So your trigger bar, if we were looking at the gun like this, sits in here. So you want to make sure that you have your shoe facing the right direction, and that direction would be engaging the safety tab here. So flat surface. This will slide down into here. And if you can see the hole, the daylight through there, you can see that it's lined up. So it can be a little bit of a struggle getting it to line up, but you're going to just do the same things that you did when you were removing it, and we're going to get this started a little bit further. So for this step, I am going to go ahead and move on to a 5/64 roll pin punch, and I'm going to finish it off with the 1/16. So get that lined up there, give it a couple taps. See, trigger bar is wanting to fall out. Just line that back up there. Did I go too far? If you drive it out the pin a little past the interior surface of the trigger shoe here, that's okay. You take your roll pin punch, but this time you're going to have to step it down to the 1/16. We're going to tap it back out a little bit, just to back it out. Get that lined up. Yep. Let's go ahead and get this started again. Use my 5/64 roll pin punch. Okay, so that has picked up the hole that is on the trigger bar. Let's go ahead and finish this off. So there you go. That's really all there is to it. Trigger toggles free. Roll pin is sitting flush on both sides. And we're going to go ahead and put this back into the gun. So reattaching the trigger bar to the trigger housing with the G43 is very simple. You see, there is your cruciform. You are going to take the front edge of that, line it up underneath that lip, pushing down and outward pressure for that tab here to slip into this groove. Very simple. Come in at an angle, slide it under, pop it in, and then there you go. Now while I have the gun, or the trigger assembly, out of the gun, I'm going to go ahead and add a drop of oil to the connector here. All you need is a drop, nothing crazy. I like to use ALG Go Juice. They make some really good products. Really, at the end of the day, in my opinion, any oil that you have out there is going to end up doing the job. I just got a bottle of that. I use it up. Never had any issues. So I'm going to go ahead and work that in a little bit in between the trigger bar and the connector itself. Let's go ahead and get it back into the gun. Tip in the trigger shoe. Now for reinstallation into the gun, I'm going to put in the trigger shoe to the groove, slide in my trigger housing. So it sits just like that. Now I will take my pin that I removed earlier, slide it in, use my Glock Armorer's tool to push it into the point where it is evenly split on both sides. It's about good there. So now I will also reinstall my slide release. Lays down in the groove, hole gets lined up, take my locking block, push that down in the groove, and then if you look through here, you can see that there's a slight mismatch. So what I will do for this is I will take my trigger pin, get it started on one side, take my Glock Armorer's tool, and whether you push it upward pressure or downward pressure just to get the holes between the frame, the locking block, the trigger, and the slide release all lined up with each other. Put a little bit of upward pressure, push it through, and then once you get it to the point where the grooves and the channels that were in the trigger pin end up catching this leg here of the slide release, it gets locked in, and then you can't push it anymore. All right, so take my slide, reinstall it, do a function check, and let's look at a comparison. So very similar to the G48, where previously with the OEM shoe, the position of the trigger shoe with the striker cocked was right here. And now with the Poly DAT shoe, the cock position sits where the wall used to be before. Reach the wall, which is definitely a lot shorter in comparison to the OEM cock position to wall. Now here is the Poly DAT trigger cock position to the wall. So their advertised reduction in trigger travel being about 20% does seem to be about accurate. And then follow through. So it does come back a little bit further from the OEM, but overall trigger travel is shortened. So similar to my G34 that has the tack trigger along with my G48, I can say that that is definitely a better feeling, more positive pull. Let's go ahead and put the trigger scale on there and see what the weight is. So a little under 4.5. A little over 4.5. And a little under 4.25. Sorry, 4.5. Very similar results to what I saw with the G48. That definitely feels a lot better. So also keep in mind that trigger weight pull, trigger pull weight is in combination with not just the Poly DAT trigger shoe, and Overwatch Precision does not state that they will reduce trigger pull. In fact, they explicitly state that lightening the pull weight is a combination between their shoe, their connector, along with the trigger spring. So keeping with the Ghost Edge connector in here, which is 3.5 pounds, and then using the Poly DAT trigger shoe, we're looking around 4.5 on average. Definitely still a better feel, more positive. And it's not so much the flat face that makes it feel different, though it is different. It is having the width of the trigger shoe that engages with the pad of your finger that really makes it feel a lot better and more controllable. So that wraps up today's video. Definitely appreciate you guys taking the time to watch it. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, go ahead and subscribe, and then even if you feel so inclined, share it. So like I always say, I do these videos to share my experiences. You know, may not be obviously not the only experience, and may not even be the best, but this is coming from just a regular guy that just likes to go shoot at the range recreationally, and likes to upgrade my stuff. So if this can help any of you guys out there that are looking at installing one of these, don't be intimidated by the process of removing the OEM shoe. As you saw in the video, super simple, and then installing it is a breeze also. So again, thank you everybody for taking the time to watch the video. Have a good night.